let's start with the white items. I will be comparing the items to the other items in their tier, meaning if I have a white item and a red item both in S, they are not the same amount of good. Up first we have Eclipse Light. Unfortunately, I gotta put this right down in C tier. It's just not enough barrier to affect anything. Even while spamming every Artificer ability as fast as I could, with 2 stacks of this, I could barely get the barrier stacking. It's simply not worth having most of the time. However, I can see the argument for things like Engineer Turrets or Captain's Diablo Strike really giving giant barrier bursts, but it's not very controllable, so I can't put it high. Hiker's Boots, though, I can put into B. It's the perfect B tier item. Now, a lot of people get this item wrong. It does not give you crit chance as you are higher than an enemy. In fact, it doesn't directly increase crit chance at all. Hiker's Boots actually gives you a stackable buff every time you hit an enemy from a higher altitude. You can see that buff above your health. So if you hit an enemy one time from a higher altitude, now you have an extra 1% crit chance and an extra 1% crit damage for 10 seconds. If you hit an enemy again before that 10 seconds is up, the timer will reset and now you'll have a 2% chance and damage buff until it runs out. It stacks by giving you 1 more stack per hit and adding 10 to the maximum, meaning 2 of this item gives you 2 buff stacks every hit for a maximum of 20 stacks. To put it simply, it is a Lensmaker's glasses that you have to hit enemies from a higher elevation to gain. But they also increase crit damage a little. I think straight crit glasses would be a lot better, so I can't put it above a B. Now for the greens. Collector's Compulsion gives you a 3% buff to all stats for 20 seconds upon picking up an item or other interactable. This also gives you a buff that you can stack up to 3 times per item, meaning with 1 green item you can get a 9% bonus to all stats. Now this effect is really solid because it counts for all pickups. Of course it works for items, but also Monster Teeth, Gore's Tome, Elusive Antler pickups, and essentially anything else you can think of that you pick up. The bonus here is that the 20-second cooldown resets every time you pick something up, meaning you can keep that 9% stat increase pretty consistently just by picking one thing up every 20 seconds. So essentially an Irradiant Pearl as a green, which deserves an A because you're not always going to get that full use out of it. Up next is the Kinetic Dampener. This drops solidly into A tier. This is essentially a Rose Buckler, which is also an A tier green, but instead of gaining 30 armor while sprinting, you have it while you have shield, which gives some great synergy with other shield items like Personal Shield Generator and Plasma Shrimp. Plus, it fires out a shockwave for 100% damage when the shield is depleted, which stuns enemies, so it's a nice get out of jail free card when you're overwhelmed. Box of Dynamite is next, and it's a really fun item that allows your drones to drop dynamite on enemies for 240% damage every 10 seconds. But drones don't share your items, so the impact in a run isn't super huge, but it's still pretty helpful given all the new drones and drone AI upgrades, so I'll place it in B tier. Finally, our last green is Faraday Spurs, which I will be placing right into S tier. This item increases your movement speed as you sprint to up to 160% more. For reference, that is equal to over 15 Paul's Goat Hooves or 5 Red Whips, which is already a green item. As you sprint, you gain charge, and once the charge reaches 25%, you can jump up to a max of 200% higher and trigger an electric discharge for 400% damage, which increases per stack by 280. The radius of the explosion depends on the charge and also increases per stack. This is now the single best movement speed item in the game, and it feels like maybe it should be a red to be honest, so an easy S. Before we get into the red items, guys, we got merch, I got hats, I got shirts, they're mad soft, we got stickers, go check it out, link in the description, or you can just find it right below the YouTube video. Let's jump back in. As for the red items, we start with the substandard duplicator. Very simply, it gives you a temporary extra version of every item you pick up. They last for 90 seconds plus 10 per stack. I'm going to drop this in A tier. I could definitely see an argument for B tier as it's not going to make or break a run, but if you get this early enough in a run, getting a second of every single item you pick up is really nice. It also gets a bonus because it's the same goodness on everyone, other than Drifter, that is, who it's actually kind of insane on because of her temporary items. This item just gives you more power for your runs and shouldn't be overlooked. Up next we have the Networked Suffering. Welcome on into the easy S tier, my guy. Now they don't call me Trento AoE Mento for nothing, but even unbiasedly this item is cracked. It allows you to infect up to 4 enemies plus 2 per stack with a virus. As you damage an infected enemy, 50% of that damage is duplicated into a total damage pool. Every 3 seconds, that damage is sent out to all infected enemies. For example, if I infect 4 enemies and deal 100 damage, that 100 damage still goes through, but now 50 damage is added to the pool. After 3 seconds, all 4 enemies take 50 damage each. So my 100 damage turned into a total of 300 damage within that time. It's an insane AoE item, and my only complaint is the damage doesn't have any sort of proc ability for things like bans or bleed, as far as I can tell. Not saying it should, because then it would be even more busted, but like, that would be sick. Still S tier. Finally, our best buddy friend, the Orphaned Core. This item adds a friendly, rolly guy to your team that launches itself at enemies for 400% damage. However, it inherits all movement speed items. This includes everything from Goat Hooves to Berserker's Pauldrons, and even, yes, Faraday Spurs. The faster the best buddy is, the more damage he does. Now, he doesn't take items like bans to proc and can't really use any of your other items, so I simply cannot put him S tier. I'm so sorry. However, you can pet him for a free blast shower every 15 seconds to clear all debuffs. So it cannot be B tier. So he sits probably near the top of A. He may be hard to catch for the blast shower effects, but it can come in clutch, but we all know he's an S tier in our hearts. Next up, let's talk about the yellow items. First, the odd ones that don't come from bosses. The exposed Cerebellum and the encrypted Cerebellum don't do anything outside of unlocking a boss, so they will be F tier. Sorry guys. The Sentry Key gives 15% movement speed, and you can have these after Conduit Canyon, but they don't stack at all, so I'm giving it a C. The Prison Matrix, if you decide to keep one, also doesn't stack, but it gives you 50 armor, which is almost 2 Rose Bucklers that are just kind of always on. I couldn't decide between B and A tier, but I'm gonna put it B because it's kind of a hassle to obtain one. Now for the actual boss items. First, the Functional Coupler. This comes from the new Soulless Amalgamator that usually spawns on stage 3. This gives you an extra equipment slot just like Retool Multi. Also, Retool Multi can now hold 4 equipments with this. I'm giving this an A tier because it's super nice to have 2 equipments. Having one for damage like Samarang or Royal Capacitor, and one for utility like Recycler or Executive Card is so helpful to not have to choose. But the helpfulness of the item is fully based on the equipments you find in a run, so I can't give it that run-saving S tier rank. The other boss item is the Faulty Conductor. Now I'm placing this in A tier pretty firmly. It's a great item that gives you and nearby allies, including drones, 30% more attack speed and movement speed for 7 seconds every 15 seconds. It also makes all electric-based attacks automatic crits, so survivors like Artificer, it's actually crazy on. All things considered, it should be an S tier yellow, but you can only get this item from the Alloy Hunter, which only spawns if you specifically go to Conduit Canyon on your way to fight Soulless Wing, so there's no possible way to get it in your typical straight to Mythics run, so it doesn't quite reach that S tier rank. Next, I'll talk about the new equipment, the Deus Ex Machina. I'm gonna put this in B tier, and I know you all are gonna say it could be higher, and maybe it should be A, but let me explain. This allows you to block any instance of damage once every 15 seconds if you do it right. If you mistime it, then it's 60 seconds. If you block successfully, your next attack has a guaranteed proc chance on any on-hit effects. Now let me talk about why it's great first. You can block any damage. Fall damage, blood shrines, void cradles, anything like that you can completely negate and give yourself guaranteed procs. However, on the bad side of things, the window is small to parry, and using it mid-combat can be tricky because there is so much else to focus on. It's oddly enough more of a utility equipment for me than a defense one. Plus, guaranteed procs sounds really good, but survivors that use proc items like Bleed on Commando, this is kinda useless. Because what's it going to apply? 1 stack of Bleed guaranteed? Sick. Where it shines is burst survivors like Loader or Railgunner. You have some ATGs on these guys or some perforators, then you're golden. However, those burst survivors are, well, burst survivors, not proc survivors. So you may have an ATG or two, but how consistently helpful is it going to be to look at your equipment, set up a parry, then go in for an attack to get the guaranteed ATG, instead of just swinging away and getting it 10% of the time? Now, it can be helpful, but I think its features may be slightly overhyped right now, but free Blood Shrines and Void Cradles and avoiding fall damage is really nice, but there are a lot of other equipments it just doesn't compare to, so it slots into B. Lastly, of the item rarities we can compare against, we have the lunar item, Neutronium Weight. This item reduces damage output, attack speed, and movement speed all by 30% and 10 more each stack, and reduces armor by 35 plus 15 more per stack. And if it stopped there, it would be awful, obviously. However, once you damage an enemy, you hot potato it right over to them instead. So in reality, it should only ever be in your possession for a fraction of a second while fighting, and should nerf all the enemies you are fighting. I'm placing this guy A tier when compared to other lunar items, as it's generally just an upgrade on your run and can really nerf tough enemies like that overloading Elder Lemurian on stage 4. The one issue I've heard about is that it's super glitchy and doesn't work right. I'm going to ignore this for my ranking's sake, but just know that if you decide to go the Neutronium route, I cannot guarantee it works as advertised. Alright, that is all the normal items. Now onto the new item rarity, created by crafting with our good boy Chef. We obviously don't have any items to compare these to, so I'm just going to rank them to each other and tell you what I think of them. Starting with Quick Fix. This item gives you bonus health and regeneration gains by 50% plus 15 per stack. All of these items are going to be decent, but this one is the most decent. It's a very solid health and healing bonus that outweighs most other healing items in the game. I'm putting it right in the middle at B for our benchmark. Up next is the Seared Steak. Now I almost put this in F because it closely resembles that of a bison steak, and I still might because ew, but this is obviously a clear upgrade to bison steak, giving you 50 bonus health plus 5% of your max HP. I'm still not ranking it high, but it's getting a C tier from me. False Sun gets a lot of use out of this, but 5% health is just a budget personal shield generator, and the 50 health by the time you reach Chef in that bazaar just isn't gonna matter much. Now let's talk about the Hearty Stew. This increases regeneration by 2.5 HP per second, and at max health, all regen is added to your base damage. This means after picking this up, things like Titanic Knurl or Cautious Slug are now adding to your base damage, which is kinda nuts. Plus, Rejuvenation Rack also affects health regen, so you're starting to see potentially huge numbers. Of course, that only happens when you're at full health, but the regeneration gets you there quicker, so I'm giving this an A tier rank. Up next, we reach kind of the absurd area, starting with the Ultimate Meal. This very simply has the effect of 2 57 leaf clovers when you are at full health, and shields do not count as health, so if you have any shield or extra barrier, it counts at being max. Having 2 clovers is genuinely insane, and part of the crafting recipe of this is a clover, but giving up 1 clover to have 2 clovers most of the time is a recipe for success. So it's going straight into S tier. Finally, we have Sauteed Worms. S tier, immediately. 10% chance on hit to summon a spectral worm that seeks out enemies and ignites them for 500 total damage per second for 10 seconds. In other words, a 10% chance on hit to deal 5,000% total damage. And it looks absolutely badass, I cannot lie. The crafting recipe is both perforators combined, so it is a hefty price. But come on, you're not gonna not take the opportunity now, are you? And that wraps up my perfect tier list with absolutely zero room for improvement. Trust me, it's completely perfect after using these for a total of like 2 weeks. In all honesty, it's early days with all these items. And I'm sure there's more tech to be discovered, so if there is anything you want others to know, put it in the comments below, and subscribe for more helpful stuff like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.